So then if we move to the forgotten parent study, so here we interviewed a total of 89 people who said that they were alienated from a child because of exposure to parental alienating behaviours. And we also have some other studies where we asked targeted parents to complete different surveys to find out more about their experience. So what I'm going to talk about is, I guess, a summary of all of those studies so far. And I'll focus on how they described their experience, but also the coping strategies that they used to, I guess, try and manage the situation that they were in. So both the helpful coping strategies and the unhelpful coping strategies we identified. Again, we found evidence in this research that parental alienating behaviours are an insidious form of family violence. And so many of our participants reported that before the relationship ended with the alienating parent, that alienating parent had perpetrated other types of violence against them before family separation. And for some of the targeted parents, they said that was the reason why they left the relationship to, I guess, find a place of safety. And then that abuse and coercive control continued after family separation. And then the alienating parent used the child as part of that coercive control. The parents we interviewed reported experiencing all kinds of family violence. So they reported coercive control, psychological abuse and manipulation, physical violence perpetrated by the alienating parent. Some of them talked about sexual violence, financial control. And so there were parents who were very concerned about the welfare of their children in that situation. What we also found is that all of the participants tended to talk about their grief for their lost child who was still alive. And they talked about the complexities of that grief experience. So it was a grief that other people didn't understand, even people close to them didn't necessarily understand. They talked about the grief that just wasn't acknowledged, and a grief that where there was just no support, and also a grief that was denied. So they felt like there was nowhere, sometimes they felt like there was nowhere for them to turn to get the support and acknowledgement, and just someone to say that I hear and I understand. So they talked about very complex grief reactions. And of course, those grief reactions and their trauma experiences were then compounded by trying to use the services that they initially thought would be there to help them and their children. So I don't think anybody in our sample talked about having a positive experience with the family court. I think they all talked about how that compounded their distress and their trauma and their grief and loss experience. Some people talked about having access to mental health services, and for some of them, they said that that was a really important, useful, and healing experience. But for some, they found it very difficult to find a practitioner who had enough knowledge of parental alienating behaviours and their impact, and then that impacted on their ability to engage with that practitioner, trust that practitioner, and then work with them in a productive way.